good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The following show is just horrifying. Beware.
My friendship to all of you precludes my involvement with any one of you. But if you wanna make love, then I do too, and I'll be right there behind you. All in the name of oh, all in the name of oh, all in the name of oh.
Greetings, constant listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Losers Club. I am your host, Jen After Sunset Adams, and we've got a fantastic episode for you today. I've just cracked open my favorite back porch beverage, which is strawberry lemonade Kroger brand LaCroix, because it is way better than the actual LaCroix. Shout out to LaCroix. I don't know what time it is where you are, constant listener, but down here at Losers Club headquarters, the sun has just disappeared over the horizon. The sky is filled with gorgeous rays of red, yellow, and orange, and night is approaching because we are talking about Just After Sunset. This is the first of what may be a two-part episode as we rank and discuss the 13 Dark Tales in Stephen King's fifth short story collection. But I am not alone. Pulling up a deck chair next to me all the way from Chicago, Mike, say hello. Tell us your first experience with Just After Sunset, and do you enjoy reading short stories?
So, hey, this is Michael Monroeville Mall Rothman. Don't think Pittsburgh is mentioned in this collection. I have to go rack my brain. I don't think so. I think it's more Florida, which is actually ironic considering I'm actually from Florida. But I've never read this short story collection. I've heard for years how it's actually an underrated collection and that this is sort of like a, King comeback. But at the same time, I thought the same of Everything's Eventual last year. So I love short stories. I don't like writing them. I hated my short story classes in college, mostly because I wasn't allowed to write genre short stories and I had to write, meditative, reflective literature that was boring to me. So, I would just end up writing about my nightmare family, and I'm not John Irving, so I don't know how to do that. So but I do love the medium, and I think when it comes to horror stories, I mean, that's kind of what I cut my teeth on, with this genre. So as a fan, for me, I always love when we get these type of episodes, because this is, I love all the episodes we do at Losers Club, but like when we do the short story collections, I think these are my favorite, just because there's so much economy and there's just so much difference of opinion, and just also I love ranking things. So
yeah,
I'm excited for today.
Same. These are always the ones I try to jump on as fast as I can because I just love talking about the short stories.
Yeah.
Well, also joining us from Chicago, after presumably writing some short stories of her own, Mel, say hello. Tell us your first experience with Just After Sunset, and do you enjoy reading short stories?
Yes, hello. This is Mel, the cat from Hell Castle. My cat is currently freaking out, so I'm sorry if you can hear him. He's decided to start playing with a ping pong ball just as we started recording.
As long as he's not chewing through your torso, I think
we're
okay.
Not yet. That's later. I first read Just After Sunset. It must have been probably close to when it came out. I get really excited when Stephen King releases any short story or a collection. I try to read them pretty immediately. And I won't tell you which three stories I remembered from that first reading most vividly, but there were three that stood out that I carried with me from this collection. And so when it was time to do the episode on this collection, I was like, oh, right, that's this one, and this one. And I didn't really remember any of the other stories in there. So I was excited to get back in there and kind of be like, what's the vibe of this collection? And I do think there are a lot of really interesting through lines, and the portrait that it paints of King's mind and all the planets that his mind is orbiting most severely is so interesting to me. So I feel very privileged to be on this episode. I love short stories. I do write my own, although I'm currently working on something longer, which I'm finding much more difficult. Oh. I think it's in the introduction to another collection that King compares a short story to like a kiss in the dark, it's this punctuated, abbreviated, but nevertheless titillating and they can also be like a stab in the dark, I guess.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't always have to be a kiss, but
punch in the gut in the dark.
Yeah, I love the discreet and kind of just effective with an A nature of short stories. You really can, even though they're short, they feel super immersive if you're a fan of the form. And so I also think they're really hard to write. There needs to be a certain amount of consideration and polish that when you're considering a novel isn't there, because a novel is this bulky thing that is a little more forgiving of your language and your structure. And a short story kind of has to be this really polished gem that you uncover rather than this trail that you're walking, right? So I just love the form, and I'm so excited to talk about this collection with y'all.
Oh, I love that. And when we talk about, before we get into the short stories, I want to talk about his foreword, where he specifically talks about the difference between writing short stories and novels. And I definitely want to talk more about that with you, particularly since you've done both of those. I tried to write a poem one time and it was terrible. And that was my last attempt at writing anything that was in the world of fiction or not like just
we should do like a Mortified-esque episode where the losers read their embarrassing old writing.
I would burst into flames.
I'd have to like undelete my live journal and just like read entries and just cower.
Oh my God. Yeah, I showed it to my boyfriend at the time and even he was like,
Yeah. It's like currently listening to Incubus, Pardon Me or whatever, like.
Oh. But those thoughts are important, right? And the world needed to hear them at the time.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Well, joining us from a little further south of Chicago, Ashley, say hello and tell us your first experience with Just After Sunset, and do you enjoy reading short stories?
Hello, this is Ashley Gingerbread Girl Cassidy,
Oh.
and I have had Just After Sunset on my shelf my whole life, and I thought I had read it. I don't think I had. I think this was the first time I read it because there were some that I remembered. I remember The Cat from Hell, obviously. And I think I may have sought that out after I saw, it wasn't
It's for Tales from the Dark Side.
Tales from the Dark Side. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think I may have sought it out and read it on its own, but I didn't remember any of the others. So I think this was my first time. Which was a nice surprise as I was like reading it. And then I was like, you know what? I don't think you've read this before.
I don't remember that. Yeah.
You just owned it since you were, 20.
Yeah.
And
do you like to read short stories a lot?
I do. I do really like to read short stories. I always have to talk myself into reading a short story collection, weirdly enough. You know what I mean? It's never something I gravitate towards. And every single time I do, I'm like, that was lovely.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I have the short stories and anthologies. Like I have them and they're by authors I love or directors I love. And it's just not ever something that draws to me. I think it's because there's usually not like one coherent hook that is grabbing me, but I love them. And I'm always glad that I
Ever since I got to be on the Everything's Eventual episode last year, like you said, Jen, like as soon as this was announced, I grabbed it because I was like, I want someone to make me read the short stories because I like them so much. I just never choose to read them on my own.
Yeah. And whenever there's a stinker, there's another one that's just around the corner.
Yeah. You know what? Start a new one.
Exactly. I do love reading short stories. I talked about this a lot with Everything's Eventual. And I've probably told this story before on this very pod, but The Stand was the first King novel I ever read. But I think my first ever King anything was when I stole my dad's copy of Night Shift and went straight to The Mangler because of that title. I just couldn't pass it up. And that is the collection that really kind of got me into King. And this is the collection that got me back into King. We just did an archives episode and Dan Caffrey called it a gap year. And we've talked about this a lot where people kind of like you take a break from King and you've grown up reading him and then you move away. Lots of times it's in college and then you come back. And it almost feels like the dividing line between reading his work as a child and reading it as an adult, you know? And so this was what I think got me back after my own gap year. On our Duma Key episode, I talked about starting that book and then getting mad and not finishing it for years.
That's where I'm at.
I know. Well, there was one particular thing that happened, and I was like, I just can't do it. And it was more to do with where I was in my own life. But then in 2008, I was looking through my book. Turns out my stupid ex gave me a hard copy of Just After Sunset for my birthday, and I remembered that when I looked at the title page and saw his stupid little message. So I ripped that out. But I'm pretty sure I read it cover to cover at the time, and then I was back into King because it was Under the Dome after that. Yeah. And then I think I went back and started picking up some of the lesser known ones, the less iconic ones, and the rest is history.
Yeah. It's a pretty exciting year, like a pretty exciting area that we're getting into finally, I feel like. I mean, we could get into it a little bit, just especially where he's at. Sorry, jumping ahead a little bit.
Oh, no, you're right. Well, that's where we're going. But before we do, I want to say this is definitely a book episode, but we are going to do it a little bit differently. We're not going to go through every section, although we have to stop in at the Derry Public Library. And then we are going to discuss each of the stories in the collections using our own collective ranking. And we may not get through them all today, but we are going to start with our least favorite of the collection and work our way to the best. And along the way, we'll note any King's Dominion or Pound Cake or anything else, like connections we see, because we definitely have to talk about this hilarious little pound cake in mute, which I just about died when I listened to. So stay tuned for that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before it's too dark, let's step into the Derry Public Library.
Mike Hanlon, if you see...
Hey, excuse me, sir. Do you have Prince Albert in a can? You do? Well, you better let the poor guy out.
Yeah, Mike Hanlon, that I had to go, that I had to get cleaned up. Tell him. Tell him I'll see him tonight.
Get out! Last chance, Toja. Get out! Get out!
This is a section where we talk about the history of the book and how it came to be. So this was released in hardcover by Scribner on November 11th, 2008. It is King's 5th collection and his 58th book. But I was really fascinated with the foreword of this book. One of the things that I always love about his collections is his little Uncle Stevie introductions, and it's just so funny to see how his voice kind of evolves through that. But he talks about he starts by talking about short fiction in general and kind of the difference between this collection and some of the previous collections. And I definitely think there's a different vibe to this one and kind of a mutating vibe as we go through them all. But he says on page 3, then one day 3 or 4 years ago, I got a letter from Katrina Kennison, who edited the annual Best American Short Story series. She has since been succeeded by Heidi Pittler, to whom the book you are holding is dedicated. Miss Kennison asked if I'd be interested in editing the 2006 volume. I didn't need to sleep on it or even think it over on an afternoon walk. I said yes immediately. For all sorts of reasons, some even altruistic, but I would be a black liar indeed if I didn't admit self-interest played a part. I thought if I read enough short fiction, immersed myself in the best the American literary magazine had to offer, I might be able to recapture some of the effortlessness that had been slipping away. Not because I needed those checks, small but very welcome when you're just starting out, to buy a new muffler for used car or a birthday present for my wife, but because I didn't see losing my ability to write short stories as a fair exchange for a wallet full of credit cards. I read hundreds of stories during my year as guest editor, but I won't go into that here. If you're interested, buy the book and read the introduction. The important thing is that as it affects the stories that follow is that I got excited all over again, and I started writing stories again in the old way. I had hoped for that, but had hardly dared believe it would happen, which I think is such a sweet little introduction to a collection, because he's kind of talking about how he fell in love with writing the form too.
Side note, I did buy when it came out the Best American Short Stories anthology that he edited, just because it said edited by Stephen King in huge letters on the cover. And then I was so disappointed. I didn't know how anthologies worked. So I was reading them and like, this isn't Stephen King.
Yeah.
And I didn't read it and I don't know where it is.
No.
Literally the same story. Yes, exactly. And the same disappointment too. I remember thinking like, wait, he doesn't even have like, I thought like he'd maybe at least get like one story in, but it's just his intro or something like that. I think it was green. Like the cover was maybe green or something, but yeah. So funny, Mel.
I did try to find his intro because I enjoy reading his intros to books, but I ran out of time.
That was one thing I was a little bit bummed about, because in Everything's Eventual, he kind of opens every story with a little note. And I really, really enjoyed that more than I thought I would. I remember the first story. I was like, I don't know if I should read these. I think I should just read the short story and then maybe go back. And then I got into them, and they really provided some cool insight. And for, Just After Sunset, he does not do that. And I found myself missing it. I wanted to hear him sort of say what his inspiration was, especially since so many of these stories in this collection kind of have a similar theme. I was like, what's going on, bud?
Yeah.
My edition has one at the end, I think.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
You know what? I had to read I think I read it on Scribd.
Oh.
So I don't know if
maybe they don't include it. Well, never fear, because I am pulling from those. So I will add in the little inspirations there. Because I agree. But I did want to ask, is there a difference in feeling of reading those little notes before or after?
I think so. I mean, I think being able, I kept going back when I found out that they were in the back, because I was using, I look through a lot of the wikis and stuff as I'm reading sometimes, not to spoil anything, but just to kind of get a context of where it was published, especially if it's not in the beginning, which, as Ashley mentioned, it is in the very beginning, and Everything's Eventual, which has been nice, which was nice. And so, I did end up going back and dialing on there. I do think it's interesting because there were so many stories I didn't realize that he wrote long ago. There was one in particular that I thought that was actually written maybe after this big thing in pop culture, which I'll bring up in that short story, but he had actually written it 5 years before the pop culture moment happened. So not having the context sometimes allows it a little bit, I guess, a more objective reading on it, as opposed to basically him giving a point of view of where it is, and then me kind of seeing it through that lens. I guess in a way I see it both ways, but I love having it regardless. I love having the sort of liner notes. I love liner notes. I'll read them for days. So
I would never read them before I popped into a story, I don't think, but
yeah,
they are so lovely to have. He even notes at the beginning of that section, he's like, I know readers love this shit, so I'm just gonna throw it in there.
Right.
But I always find, usually when I finish a story and I'm like, wow, I cannot wait to hear where this came from. That's always one of the note sections where it's much shorter, and he's just like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. I was eating a burger on the sidewalk and I saw this guy, and it made me think of, and it's like, oh.
Right.
Exactly. I was so inspired.
And every time, I remember he talks about this in Misery, at the very end of Misery, seeing a kid walking with a raccoon in a wastebasket or a shopping cart or something. And the one that always sticks out to me is if in Everything's Eventual, the kid dumping change into the sewer grate. Yeah. And that was the image that sparked it. And so every time I read something, I'm like, what's the image? What's the one that got you, that hooked you in? So yeah, I do enjoy reading those. Mel, have you ever written afterwards like that for stories? And how much would you reveal?
Yes. So I've been subject to a couple interview questions from after publishing a short story in a couple places, and they'll often ask where did this come from? And I don't think I hold back. Maybe it is the same sort of thing where people might find it disappointing, but I think it's just summing up. It is usually an image. For me, it's also usually an animal. I think the 3 stories that I've explained, they're all associated with a very particular animal, and I'm like, I really like looking at this critter, and then I decided to write a story about it. It's all bristly, and it's got these appendages. Why wouldn't we kind of expound on that?
I want to hear what those 3 stories are as we go through, too.
Yeah, sure. They are Skitter Dead, which is about a house centipede. 10 deals with the indigo snake, which is about a snake. And Crawfather, which is about a giant crawfish.
Ooh,
that checks out. That checks out for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say. I feel like they're on me.
I like to get those questions, though. I feel like authors, once they're big enough, they kind of resent them, just like how Radiohead is like, we're not playing Creep, they're like, we're not we're not explaining. So I respect that King is just still kind of like, yeah, I'll tell you what went on in my brain, and often it's trivial and other times it's not so trivial, but it is usually, I think, spurred by some kind of very solid image or like not so much a concept, but like just a picture, and then you start and see what happens.
Well, it's so cool for young writers too to read that, like that have never written anything, that think they want to write something and can't figure out where to get inspiration. It's like, anything.
Yeah.
The bug in your shower. Write a story
that can
about
be a
that.
story.
Yeah.
The best thing I got out of On Writing, aside from the fact that I love it, was just permission, and I feel like like you approach writing a lot of people approach writing as this like kind of mythical thing, and it's almost like a lofty on high kind of thing, and just permission to like, maybe I can just write a story about this thing that's in my corner, I can't get rid of it. I feel like that is inspiring when you're starting out.
The thing that comes to mind with this intro for me is just the idea that he's so self-aware about the short story medium. Like in Everything's Eventual, he talked about how he's lucky because he's a blockbuster name that, a short story collection might wind up in the bestsellers, like the New York Times bestseller list. Like he talked about that in Everything's Eventual. And here he talks about how, this used to just be something that he paid the bills, and he had to kind of find his, the wherewithal to start writing it again, which is kind of a fun little Rocky-esque comeback story here to be like, oh yeah, you got it, Steven. It's like Rocky 5, except he's not on the streets and fighting, Tommy Gunn. But
typing up the steps of the
yeah, right. He's just like, I got it. Oh my God, there's rest stop. But I would say, the thing that's so weird about that is that like he's right. Like I can't think of. It's so strange to me why that is the case with short stories. Like Mel, you just mentioned like the collection that he edited, and how both of us were kind of like, we're not going to read this. And I wonder if that's the psychology. Like if he's right in that sense, it's like even if our favorite authors have a short story collection, like why is there an aversion towards that? I mean, I know with the memoir is different. Like David Sedaris is like, or Sedaris, I always fuck up his name, but I feel like he's the exception too, where it's like, but that's like a collection of memoirs, right? So like maybe that's like, it's just more like if it's reality based, maybe people are more receptive of it. But like, yeah, I can't think of another like best-selling short story collection beyond King. And I don't know. That's just something I've been thinking about lately. It's like, why is that? Like, especially in today's day and age where binging and episodic television is so big, like you'd think that it would
be bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the episodic television is still more akin to a novel, unless it's an anthology series. Although those are always kind of making a comeback. I think in the era of parasocial relationships, it makes sense that people just want to connect with a static set of recurring characters with some rotation, but not a lot. And there just seems to be an obsession with the commitment to a world that is sprawling. I mean, all of the big franchises like Game of Thrones and everything is just very based on this like solid foundation. People like that solidity and that longevity. I don't get it either because, again, like I prefer the quick kiss in the dark. Like who wouldn't want a little bit of a makeout session that's like giving you a lot of variety? But I guess maybe it's just easier for escapism to keep escaping to the same place.
Yeah. I mean, you're dead on with like the franchising. I didn't even think about that. Like it's totally true. I mean, even just thinking about the idea that like, I love Stranger Things, right? Like when that first season ended, everyone was like, oh, this is like a cool one and done story. We can maybe tell another story that's like in that mold that's with new characters. And like, no, they didn't do that. And also probably financially that would have been a disaster because you have these characters that are established. You have this world. They've been able to stretch it across for 5 seasons.
Halloween 3, Season of the Witch.
Exactly. Like
we tried.
I mean, that's 100% right. I mean, yeah, maybe the psychology.
You got to commend them for the swing. We just love familiarity. It's all this. It's the IP thing too. Like we're just returning and returning to IP, and like we're addicted to familiarity. It takes like a lot of willpower to get over the hump into novelty for us, which everyone should exercise it. Come on, it's a muscle. Flex it. Read some short stories.
Yeah, and I think it's easier to sell too. Like because Stephen King is one of the few people I think that can sell a novel with just his name. Yeah. And if you see a new Stephen King, you're going to grab it, or at least I am. But whenever like a new movie comes out, they put like the Boogeyman on the cover of Night Shift, or they put like The Mist on the cover of Skeleton Crew, because I think it's just. it's harder to sell too. So for like the casual reader who's not like seeking out the newest books, then I think it's going to be tricky, you know?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, even just thinking, and he kind of gets at that when he's talking about the titling of the book, you know, like, just, well, how do you sell this? You know, like, do you just pick the biggest story in the collection? But even then, that's not really a selling point either. I mean, especially in today's day and age where it's like SEO is so big, it's kind of funny how like you're bringing up the idea of them recovering the book with like The Mist or like The Body with Stand By Me for different seasons. Like, it is funny that that SEO mindset was like 20, 30 years ago when they were doing this stuff. You know,
I'm trying to think of too, like the other famous short story authors, and I feel like the only two that rise to the top of my mind, which is very embarrassing given like how much of them I've read, is Kelly Link and George Saunders, and they're both like really identifiable by their signature styles. Like, so it is the sort of like association with the name and like the style that you then come to associate with the name. That's really interesting to me. Are there other short story writers that are like contemporary that are doing well with short stories?
I know, I can't think.
Body and Other Parties.
I
by
have that on
Carmen
my
Maria
desk right
Machado.
now.
Oh yes, of Machado.
Yeah, Machado, which I'm really digging. But other than Joe Hill, 20th Century Ghosts, that's the only other collection that I've found in the last like 10. And that one's pretty old. I think it's 10-ish years ago.
Like Edgar Allan Poe.
Contemporary.
That contemporary.
Alvin Schwartz.
Yeah, well, there's The Lottery, Shirley Jackson too.
Most people that are
Ray
in
Bradbury.
genre today do cut their teeth with short stories, and like there are great collections. I haven't read this yet, but I'm really looking forward to picking up Theodore McCombs's The Uranians, which just came out. So that I feel like it's a common pipeline for genre writers these days to like do a short story collection and then do a novel, or do both at the same time, like release both very close together. They're definitely out there. Brian Evanson, who Randall and I interviewed, like there are lots of gemophiles. Like I'm just saying, like I think George Saunders and Kelly Link are ones that the general public might even know as short story writers. And I'm like, who are the other ones that the general public might know?
I mean, even it doesn't even work sometimes for renowned authors. Like one of my favorite authors of all time, I know it's problematic to say, but I love him to death, is Bret Easton Ellis. And his book, The Informers, which is a short story collection, is usually the one that like no one has read. And that's because
I didn't know it existed.
Right? See, that's the thing. Like, and that's like a short story collection. And honestly, like those are kind of linked. So technically it's almost like a novel, but like, you know, different, you know, characters in the same world. And yet most of the folks that are even diehard fans of his, like that's like the last one they go to. So yeah, there is this sort of weird, strange aversion. I think you're right, Mel, and that is the dedication and the time. Like, just like if I'm going to commit this, I want to live in this world. I don't want to have like dabbles here, where now I'm so like, you know, my life is such a fucking rat race that like I love having short stories because I'm like, oh, I could wake up and read for an hour and I feel accomplished, right? It's like, you know, if I have this 400, 500 page novel that's sitting on my desk, or not my desk, although I do sleep at my desk, you know, am I right? American capitalism. But no, I will say I'll wake up and I'll be like, well, I could finish this story versus a chapter that's like just chipping this, you know, large iceberg or whatever. So
it is interesting that our bias for novels seems to go against like the attention economy's bias for digestible things. Like you'd think short stories would be doing well for the reasons that you describe, Mike, but in this case we just want the big thing, the thing that requires a little more focus.
It's like the battle between our obsession with IP and our obsession with like attention. You know? And in this case, it wins out. Well, I do want to talk about the novel versus the short story because that is something that King goes into. And I pulled a couple of things from his foreword just about how he kind of views his early short story writing. I love when he talks about his early short stories as a series of piñatas I banged on, not with a stick, but my imagination. Sometimes they broke and showered down a few $100. Other times they didn't. And as a huge fan of those early short stories, I really enjoyed reading that. And then a couple of paragraphs later, he says, I wrote them fast and hard, rarely looking back after the second rewrite, and it never crossed my mind to wonder where they were coming from or how the structure of a good short story differed from the structure of a novel or how one manages issues of character development, backstory, and time frame. I was flying entirely by the seat of my pants, running on nothing but intuition and a kid's self-confidence. All I cared about was that they were coming. That was all I had to care about. Certainly, it never occurred to me that writing short stories is a fragile craft craft, one that can be forgotten if it isn't used almost constantly. It didn't feel fragile to me then. Most of those stories felt like bulldozers. And I'm assuming we've all read Night Shift and that most of our listeners have, or at least familiar with those stories, but I do think of them as like fast and hard. I think that's a really good way to describe them. And this collection doesn't feel that way to me. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't enjoy them as much, but it's just a different kind of writing. So before we talk about the difference between the short story and the novel, like, is that, Ashley, did you kind of get that vibe as well when you're reading this collection?
Well, I keep bringing up Everything's Eventual, but only because it's the latest one I read before this. But I remember there were so many. So I always read it and then I'll give it a grade. And Everything's Eventual had some Fs. Okay?
Yeah.
There was some stories I fucking hated. And there were some stories that I loved so much. And this one, a lot of C's. You know what I mean? And not necessarily like, it wasn't that I didn't enjoy it. I very much so did. There just wasn't a lot of range for this one for me. It was very one level. There weren't any standouts, but there also weren't any that I hated. So I was like, what's better? Is it better to have a collection that, like, there were some that were just like stellar, can't get them out of my head, but there were some that I fucking hated and I wish I was not there reading? Or is it better to have a, collection where it's like, okay, like at the end of every story, it was just sort of like the same feeling of like, all right, and on to the next. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the conception of it all, right? Like, so Everything's Eventual, that felt like, I mean, in hindsight, it's more like a greatest hits, right? It's like him like, all right, what do we got in the dustbin? Can I put in there in this book? Whereas like, it feels like this one was a little more modern, not more modern, but at least like more recent in terms of like the conception and putting these stories in here. And I think that it kind of, I don't know, has any of you watched like the Smartless documentary that's on HBO? It's really good. It's at the, this little indie podcast with Will Arnett and Jason Bateman and Sean Hayes. But they interviewed Jeff Tweedy, and Jeff Tweedy's like, Jason Bateman basically asked like the worst question, which is like, how do you come up with these songs or whatever? And Tweedy actually gives like a really good answer, just talking about how you eventually, you just keep hitting at it, you keep hitting at it. And you keep playing around, you keep fiddling around, when all of a sudden inspiration strikes and you just let that inspiration ride. And I think in terms of creativity, I think when you look back at outputs of any artist, it's where that wave of inspiration comes from and how well they ride that wave. And that's, I think, when it comes to short stories and especially albums, there's a lot of points where you could say, oh man, I didn't really like this wave, or I didn't like, maybe that they hit the crest on this one part or this one song or this one story, but ultimately, like what you're saying, Ashley, with like the steady flows of C's, like I think that maybe that might be where it's at with this, where it's like where the reason why like Everything's Eventually you had so many highs and lows, it's because it was like a hodgepodge of things that he was pulling from. I mean, there are some stories that were, some were from the New Yorker, some were from that he has a prompt on writing, with like 1408 that he embellished, whereas like this one, it does kind of feel like they're from the same wavelength. And I think that's maybe why it feels a little bit more,
I mean, they are literally from the same wavelength, right? Because I think this collection is especially notable in that it was completed as an exercise. It was like, I'm getting back to short stories. I'm writing them all, or most of them, in the same time period. Like The Cat from Hell is older. There might be some other older ones that I'm neglecting to remember, but this is ostensibly like the result of a sustained period of getting back to the form. And as an exercise, that's so appealing to me. And I feel like that wavelength is very visible throughout the piece, and also relates to, the themes that we're going to talk about. They are, again, revolving around a lot of the same concerns. And so as like, it's almost an exercise in like, not nostalgia, but you just see his practice on the page. This is something I love about King so much, is that he's not as interested, purposefully or non-purposefully, in presenting us with the polished gemstone. He's more like, this is what I did and this is what happened after I did it. And like this book existing as a monument to the practice of refamiliarizing yourself with the short story, especially after some traumatic things happened in your own life that are very visible on the page. Like that really endears the collection to me, and that even though there are stories in here that really do not resonate with me, that exercise makes this collection appeal to me in such a singular way.
Yeah, even though there weren't like super standouts and ones, it was more comprehensive. It was more they all seemed to fit together a little bit more than the last short story collection. But also, you know, like I said, without those like major standout stories and like the super low standout stories, I did have trouble ranking this
me too.
collection. And like
I have my number one and I have my number last.
Exactly. It was like I have my favorite and I have the one I liked the least, but like everything in the middle was kind of like I spent days going moving one up, moving one down, moving one up, moving one down until I finally sent it to Mike and I was like, "Okay, take this away from me. I can't look at it anymore."
I'm imagining like that montage in Seinfeld when like Jerry and George are like trying to figure out how to like get away from the girlfriend and go with the roommate, and you're just like, it's like a montage with the jazz playing, and you're like, oh, well, rest stop.
Well, Willa,
Ayana, like Willa, yeah, okay.
Well, and I do want to talk about that because he did give an interview that I found, and I think it kind of relates to where he was when he wrote this short story. But there is one little sentence in this foreword that I just love, and I just wanted to read it. It's at the very end, and it says, he writes, "It makes me happy when the words fall together and the picture comes and the make-believe people do things that delight me." And I just thought that was so sweet. It's like, he's enjoying this. That makes me happy.
He's like, I'm not in control. They are.
Right, exactly.
And I like to see what they do.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's kind of the way he's written about like how, like Mel, you mentioned like it's like a gem that you find, you know, and he's, I think, compared it to like a fossil that you uncover. And so, like you were saying, I do enjoy that this is like, these are the stories. This is how they come. And I just kind of polish them off.
I mean, I always hate that lack of agency, that like framing of it, because, especially because for King, these stories are like, so clearly not exterior fossils existing in the ground. These are born from a deep place in his heart and in his memory and in his experience. These stories are so personal, and we'll talk about that too. Like, this is a deeply personal collection, like much more so than like Skeleton Crew, I think, is the last one that I read, which is sort of just like a nasty hits. Or like, this just feels so emotional and so connected to what he's fixated on, to the point where like every single story, maybe not every single one, maybe there's a couple exceptions, begins with a tragedy or a death.
Totally.
And like it's just like right there, you know. So like I really hate it when authors are like, I just watch what my characters do, especially in this case where it's like, Stephen, these are really close to you.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot more that goes into it too, you know.
And it speaks to kind of where he was at. I mean, look at where this book is arriving, right? Like, this is arriving, you know, not only less than 10 years after the accident. He's coming off of Lisey's story. He's coming off of Duma-Key, you know, even to a slighter degree, some of the, you know, the stuff that he was working on before the accident. I mean, they all speak to this idea that this is a creator who's absolutely working through shit. And like also looking at it, but also like not only just personal stuff, but also seeing that he's a chaotic mind in a society that is just starting to kind of wade through the chaos of everything that's come forth. I mean, like, the majority of the stories deal with 9/11, and they deal with a society that's in flux after that sort of chaos. And I think that, you know, so much of that is just so intrinsically tied to even stories that don't mention 9/11 in this. And I think that's what's so, you know, curious and interesting. So you have this like macro disaster that we all can, you know, that we all remember. I mean, we all saw the Nicolas Cage movie.
Never forget.
So we all remember. But no, then, you know, then we have the micro thing with the accident incident, and seeing the way that he's able to kind of collide between those two things. This does also feel like a greatest hits of King from this era. Like, you know, like when you think about like just even something like even like Duma-Key is the most obvious runoff one right here, because it's like there's so many stories that even mirror Duma-Key in this collection. And so I do think that there's a sense of...
You're saying this is 10 years after?
It was okay. So the accident was in 99.
Yeah. So
right?
2008 was the book. So
I think we can probably assume, I was trying to do some little math calculations about this. I think we can assume that he started writing Willa around 2004, 2005, if he was in the process of editing the 2006 Best American Short Stories. So it's coming around 8, 9, 10 years after the accident, I think.
Because I do feel that, like, this is the evidence left behind by someone who, I hate to like do the sort of prescriptive, like, oh, I know what King was thinking, but like,
right.
Just because
that's what we all do. So
I don't know.
Yeah. These stories like are about adaptability and soldiering on in the wake of something unthinkable. And like the fact that it has been close to a decade, like he has now experienced that and can write about the process of adaptability rather than just the unthinkable thing that happened. And like, to me, that is the through line of this collection is, you know, the line in Gingerbread Girl, learning how to fall, like what happens in the wake of the fall. And he's now had the time to think about that. And so most of these stories are what comes after.
Yeah. How do we get back up?
Event. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I think when you go to, any kind of recovery meetings or 12-step meetings, like there's a big difference between new recovery and long-term recovery. And it's when it's not like a day-to-day struggle. And I think like you can tell a big difference between like Dreamcatcher and from a Buick 8 and from these stories like Do McKee. And it's something we talked about in our Do McKee episode too. It's like, this feels like a meditation on healing from someone who is not in the grips of the pain every day, you know, and it feels a little more peaceful than some of the really harsh stuff that I think he wrote in the wake of that. And I was going back to his Nightmares and Dreamscapes introduction, and there's something in there that always sticks in my mind about how he talks about your cells regenerate every 7 years, you know, and for it being like a Ripley's Believe It or Not thing. So that's not me as a scientist saying that, but just that you kind of renew yourself. And it almost feels like this is an exercise in learning how to write short stories again, but also like, what else do I still have that I need to process? Like, what is still rattling around in there that I want to get out? And that's partly, I think, why I enjoy this. But you're right, the highs aren't quite so high, although there is one high that is like my absolute highest. But it's like an album with no skips, you know, and how often does that happen, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that happens to a lot of, you know, artists and creators out there. I mean, Springsteen, we just talked about this in the Bag of Bones episode. We were like, oh, what's an artist or a musician that closely matches King? And we all pretty much had the same answers, which was like either Neil Young or Bruce Springsteen. And what they do is, you know, they're storytellers, and they also, for the most part, you know, especially Springsteen, most of his albums are short story collections, but usually under the same theme or, you know, the same sort of kind of through line. I mean, even something as modern as like The Rising or Magic, they all tend to be, you know, intrinsically tied to whatever the spirit of that moment is for him. And I think that King, in this case, really does dive into that. And I think that's what makes this collection so much more special than a lot of the prior ones. I'm not saying it's my favorite compared to the prior ones, but I do think that this is what makes it stand out, because what this collection's also doing, which we haven't said yet, is that it's also kind of foreshadowing where he's going, because there is a lot of like love. There's a lot of love stories in this, or a lot of dealing with the you know, time and love. And those are two themes that are going to become so paramount to arguably one of his greatest books, which we're going to be talking about later this year. Spoiler, I'm talking about 11/22/63. So I do think that there's something interesting happening in this moment, and I love playing like the armchair psychiatrist. Yeah, because I do like playing it here when we're looking at hindsight, because it's so interesting to see when things start percolating and developing. And I do think this is King coming around a corner and being like, all right, I'm going to go and just on a fucking tear, because I mean, spoiler alert right now, like the next few books that we're going to be covering are like all-timers, like they really are. And we're starting to see him getting into that runway of getting there. And I've, you know, having not read this, I now have some more context as to why like I'll never forget when I got just, Under the Dome in 1122, and I was like, man, where has he been? Where's this king been? And then like you read this collection, you're like, oh, this is the Rocky montage. I'm sorry I keep bringing that up, but this does feel like the Rocky montage in many ways, because he's flexing a lot of different genres in this, but also themes that are gonna be able to coalesce even stronger in following collections. So I don't know. That to me was really interesting and illuminating reading this collection. But there's also like a really great piece that John Harrison did with The Guardian, I think it was. Jen, do you want to read like the section that's from there? Because I think that's a really cool takeaway from this book also, that kind of speaks to the themes a little bit.
Yeah, it's titled My Poisoned Bonbons, which I think is just a tiny little mention in the afterword. Okay, horror needs victims, and like Hitchcock before him, King is more than happy to provide them. And just after sunset, the butt of the prank is as likely to be an illustrator or a successful suspense novelist as the more commonplace salesman, lone female jogger, psychiatrist, or insurance clerk. Their ordinariness is often depicted as having qualities of loneliness and puzzlement. They have the traditional poor fit of the world. The ones who still care about life aren't necessarily going to be rewarded for that, but the ones who don't are going to be punished and punished again. They live in a universe that went bad long ago, or maybe in one that still holds out the slightest wafer of hope, which it loses right there in front of the reader. They've done something awful. They've done nothing bad enough to deserve what happens to them. They make their confessions to priests or deaf mutes in letters and manuscripts and phone calls. Dead or alive, they are repeating loops, fading ghosts made out of the narrative structures of a Twilight Zone episode. They're trapped in King's monologue, and you're trapped with him. At first, you don't intend to be disturbed, then you are.
And he talks like he says like that, like entrapment.
Yeah,
is like is a central theme.
That's
and
so funny because I feel like the essential theme is escape from a trap.
Right?
Well, I mean, can you have one without the other?
No, you
That's
can't.
true.
You
That's
can't.
true.
You can't.
Yeah.
But the loop, I think, it persists in some stories, but in others it definitely breaks. And to me, the impression that I'm left with after the collection is one of adaptability / acceptance / literal and figurative escape from the loop.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it's so interesting talking about victims, and just the ordinary. And I think as King continues to write, there's always the joke about the haunted lamp and like, but I think he finds a lot of the terror in like really small things in this one, and like really kind of puts you in the place of his characters. Like I'm thinking about Rest Stop, which is not one of my favorites, but that's a small thing that happens, but also what would you do if you were there? You know? And I think he has a way of bringing that out.
What do we think about the title? I mean, the one that he actually did land on, because he was going back and forth on it. I don't think he's a fan of titling things. I feel like it gets to a point where he feels pressured. Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, like when you think back to, a lot of his titles are very blunt, but I think he talks about it. So there's an interview, months before this was published. It was the Lilja's Library. And he says, we went back and forth about the title. I wanted to call it Unnatural Acts of Human Intercourse. And
terrible. And
then awful. And then Lilja Library says like, yeah, I remember reading that. It was also maybe going to be called Pocket Rockets. And he goes, books with short stories are hard to title unless you name them after one of the stories. And when I finally settled on the title, I thought, gee, Unnatural Acts of Human Intercourse. That is a really good title, but they had a shit fit. I mean, I think the title works for this. I don't think that, because last year's Everything's Eventual, obviously that's the title story for one of the larger stories in there. But I think with Just After Sunset, I think it thematically really does tie into like everything we're discussing here.
Yeah. What happens after the darkness is looming, or what happens after the darkness falls? Like, what do we do? What now? And like a lot of the characters answer that question.
Yeah. And he has a lot of stories in this that involve sort of where do we go right after, and what's that like for the people on the other side as well as the people on our side. And in the paranormal world, we do refer to that sort of thing as like a sunset or a dawn. So that made a lot of sense to me as well.
When there's still light too,
Yeah.
you know, like if I compare this to Full Dark No Stars, where those 4 stories are just super dark and I love them, but like this is not a devastating collection when I read it. Like it doesn't rip me apart. It provides darkness, but there's also a little bit of light and there's a little bit of hope, you know, and you can still kind of see the sun or the lingering rays, you know. I'm imagining the sunset in Florida.
Yeah.
That's interesting that it does seem of a piece with like Full Dark No Stars, like as a sort of as a counterpoint. What about Just After Sunset?
Right. Yeah, he's like, well, that title worked. Let's do that. This one is super dark. Well, I found another interview. Actually, Mike, you found all of these interviews for me. That was super helpful. And one of them I watched it's from Barnes and Noble, and this poor guy, he seems very sweet. I don't know if he's made for the interview game, because he just is kind of boring. But there's a hilarious little moment where he's like, "So in your writing, you talk about short stories as being an art. Do you think that's true?" And King is like, "Well, yes.
Do you
If I didn't
believe
think
the
it was
thing
true,
that you said?
I wouldn't have written it." Yeah. And I mean, he's kind about it, but I was like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" But Mike, you pulled a quote from this about the lost art of the short story. Do you want to read that?
Yeah, so he's like, you know, a lot of writers who sell a fair amount of copies and can support themselves, and we're very lucky to do so, have a tendency to think about the novel. Once you get your mind set on the novel, it's very easy to lose whatever trick it is that involves writing the short story. The novel is a quagmire that a lot of younger writers stumble into because before they're ready to go there. The short stories would make money, and I got really comfortable with that format. I would think of a great short story idea, and it balloons and becomes a novel. Misery and Gerald's Game started as short stories. And I think even looking at this now, like, because later on he talks about how in that Lilja's Library interview that I mentioned earlier, he talks about how like the stories that aren't going to be in this collection are the ones that did develop into novels, because he had done Lisey and the Madmen and also Memory prior to this. And I think a lot of fans were probably anticipating that they were going to be collected into this. And I think it's interesting when you look at that quote and also the recipe for, you know, what those seeds would eventually become, how he's able to kind of pick and choose which ones he's going to linger in. Like, I always wondered, like, with him, is it like, does he write a short story and be like, all right, I can't shake this world, I need to go back to it? Or does he just actually see the opportunity in it? I think it's probably the former with him, knowing how he gets very personal with some of his writing. I don't know. I do wonder how he distinguishes some of them, because I mean, there've been multiple cases where, you know, this is his 5th collection. This is our 5th episode of talking about short story collections. Like, in all those episodes, I feel like we all always point out to a short story that we're like, this probably could have been a novel. Or this, or maybe we like finish a novel and we're like, this probably could have been a short story.
Yeah, I feel like that tends to happen more often.
He's such a straight through writer, though. Like, I feel like he just goes and then he's like, this is only the beginning of something.
Yeah.
Well, and I did want to ask, he does talk about he talks about 3 in this that are essentially novellas. They're a little too long to be considered short stories, but they're not long enough to be novels. And he mentions In, and I believe A Very Tight Place, and The Gingerbread Girl. And they're pretty long. They're also, you know, a couple of them are my personal favorites, which we'll talk about later. But
he excels at the novella. It's like his form.
He really does. And I think he can hit it and he can wallow around in it enough, but then he gets out without belaboring the story. But he does write, the Barnes and Noble guy, he's like, would you want to make In a novel? And he's like, no, In is just what it needs to be. It is exactly the right length. And I was like, I mean, you're kind of right. But Mel, I wanted to talk to you because we were talking about this a little earlier about kind of the art of writing short stories and how it's less forgiving, I think. Yeah. And so what's your take on the way he's describing this? And this term he uses, miniaturization. I think that was in the interview and not the thing, but like taking a story and miniaturizing it.
I think it's got to be different for different folks. Like, he seems to be very bad at miniaturization. Like, I feel like he won't shrink an idea if he feels like it has enough legs to really go far. And otherwise, his miniaturization is really just extending a conceit to its natural lifespan. And some of these ideas, like escaping from a porta potty or a cat that is like going to kill a hitman, like that's a morsel, you know, that's not a meal. And for him, that just seems like it probably flows out naturally and has a very delineated beginning and end. I do wonder what it's like at the initial start of any of these things when he's reaching into that like image pool and beginning. I know that for me, starting a short story, starting anything really, it takes me about 5 tries to like get into the beginning correctly, to like start the story I really want to start. But once it's like on the track, then it does feel like I know the size of it, I know the scope of it, and I've never had the problem. Like, I'm just like I've only written short stories, and working on this longer thing is like killing me. So I've never had the problem of like, this is actually too big for the container I've constructed. I think he's just so versatile. Like he starts with the bottom of the container and is like, ooh, this actually reaches its rim a mile away from me, and he can just adapt and do that, you know?
Yeah. Well, and readers will follow it too.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'll read, it doesn't really matter what length. I mean, I read 4,000 pages of The Dark Tower, you know? So he has the luxury of stretching himself and shrinking and just kind of doing whatever he wants. And he's so good at what it ends up being that we'll read it, you know?
So wait, is your hot take that The Dark Tower should have been a novella?
That is my hot take. I mean, you're kidding, but I kind of think maybe
I'm with you there,
books.
Jen. I think that would have been a killer novella.
Yeah.
Don't tell the Dans. They'll come for me.
They're gonna kill us.
Don't tell the Dans.
Well, all right. Let's talk a little bit about how this was received. I was trying to find how long it was on the bestseller list. It did become a bestseller because it's got Stephen King's name on it. But Mike, you dug up a couple of reviews. Do you want to just kind of go through a couple of them?
Yeah, so the New York Times review by Charles Taylor.
At special discount rates.
Yeah. He seriously, that's funny. I wonder if they were like, oh, we're gonna give an extra star to this because free publish.
Or they were like, we don't kill people.
Yeah,
they knocked one off.
So Charles writes, it's an uneven collection in both tone and execution, and often reminds you of how King's writing has moved beyond its genre roots. That's not to affirm the critics who have reduced King's writing to penny dreadfuls that have no bearing on the real world. In Just After Sunset, there are only flashes of the kind of recognition that King, the novelist, provides, and the short story form does not allow him the space to turn his plot devices into metaphors. But then he ultimately says, despite the disappointments of Just After Sunset in the sense that these stories remain at some level an exercise, a stopgap for the next full-fledged King project, the book also feels like the work of a writer who, even in less than top form, wouldn't dream of breaking faith with his readers. I mean, there's a lot of thoughts in a lot of those sentiments. So, I don't know. I mean, I agree with some of it, but I think most of it is, I think it's hard when you get to, I mean, he'd probably agree with this, is that I think the Times have always been pretty fucking rough on him, but, you know.
The idea of breaking faith with your readers is also kind of detestable to me. Like, it's not a thing that you actually need to like worry about maintaining.
Yeah.
And I like that King doesn't worry about maintaining it. He maintains a channel of communication, but he's not out there trying to give people what they want. He's much more concerned with what he wants.
Oh, totally.
What he wants to write about.
I mean,
exactly.
That's why we're getting Holly this September.
True, you know?
Yeah.
Hey, Holly is getting pretty good. I'm into it.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely like when constant readers like, God, King, what are we going to do next? Like, oh, we're going to go to Holly, give me again. I'm sure like everyone was like, thanks. But we'll see.
Everybody but me. And I'm like, Holly.
I love Holly.
Well, I think you will like this.
I'm so excited.
I found something just in this that I pulled just because I thought it was interesting. The literary critic Leslie Fielder, in an interview given a few weeks before he died, this is from the New York Times review, recalled telling a group of postmodern fiction writers, look, let's be frank with each other. When all of us are forgotten, people will still be remembering Stephen King. Anyone who claims to be interested in contemporary American literature needs to understand what he'll be remembered for, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and that's in our interview, he even jokes about that. He talks about how like he's, he'll be dead and there'll be that fucking clown. And, he's not wrong. I mean, I think it kind of goes back into the sort of feelings he was having when he published it, was that he thought that he was just going to be, McDonald's like in literature, which I don't think is the case at all. But
no, I don't either.
So
it could be the subject of its own episode, why his legacy will endure. Like, what about his style and what about his
100%
access to human cognition and feeling will like allows him to resonate with such a broad swath of the population. But
yeah,
do that
I
sometime.
think that would be great.
We should. Yeah. Grady Hendrix, great Stephen King reread. Always bring these up. We need to get Grady Hendrix on the episode one day. Grady writes, one of the most remarkable things about this collection is that while writing a lot of these stories, King was also in the middle of writing his massive epic-sized Thunder Lizard of a novel, Under the Dome, which is distinguished by the same clear, straightforward prose that characterizes almost all the stories in this collection. After the Baroque style of Lisey's story and the interiority of Duma Key, much of which was concerned with the inner monologue of the creation process, this is a new stripped-down King whose writing almost feels minimalist, for King that is. After all, Under the Dome may be minimalist, but it's also 1,074 pages. I agree with that. I really do, and especially like I think in that same review or rundown, Grady talks about how it's so nice to kind of go back to like the sort of, we're not talking about baby gunky or like that type of shit from like Lisey's story. So like not having that is kind of rewarding also. And I think there was a lot of back to basics in this too. But as I mentioned before, I do think it looks ahead at the future as well. So
yeah.
And then
it also shrinks too. There are so many of these stories are about a single person or a single person's journey. And like, I think that was a phase that we were in because Duma Key is such a small cast.
Yeah.
And a lot of these stories feel like they are just like inside one character's brain or maybe them talking to another person,
Yeah. And, I mean, it seems like everyone's kind of, they agree that there's a lot of like cohesion here. I mean, like,
yeah.
What is Publishers Weekly, like, is that an actual review thing or is it mostly just like a, hey, here's what's out and maybe some minor thoughts on it? Well, either way, this is a quote in here because like it does feel like a review, but it also feels like sort of like a pull quote for it. So it's like most of these 13 tales show him at the top of his game, molding the themes and set pieces of horror and suspense fiction into richly nuanced blends of fantasy and psychological realism. It is laced with moving ruminations on mortality that King attributes to his own well-publicized near-death experience. All of stuff that we've discussed. I mean, I think that's pretty apt. But when I was looking at it, I was like, this doesn't feel like a review, but it also has review qualities to it. So I don't know. I don't read Publishers Weekly. Apologies, Publishers Weekly.
I don't know, but it seems official. So I pulled that review. I think it might be kind of a mix. Like, in On Writing, he talks about the publications that just have lists of agents or lists of people you can sell stories to. I think it's kind of a mix between that and reviews, So I don't know. Maybe
so it's
just
definitely
a way to get like the titles out or something.
It's no highlights for children.
I did have highlights.
My
Goofus
favorite
and
magazine.
Gallant,
Yeah.
That Goofus. Was there anything else we want to touch on before we get into the stories?
I think
we're ready to get to the meat.
I'm ready to rank.
So ready.
Ready to rank. All right. So without further ado, let's talk about the stories. Guys, but side note, the amount of time I spent trying to figure out how to spell adieu was shocking. Adieu. We've each sent in our own individual rankings, with 13 being our least favorite short story in the collection and 1 being our favorite. As I mentioned in our Ranking Kings Endings episode, I am math adjacent since I married an accountant. So I went into the calculator lab.
She's a math ally.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not. So
I've picked up some math stuff just over the last couple of years. So I went into the calculator lab. Also, we have a calculator lab in our house.
Oh, nice.
And it is super cool. And I tabulated the results to come up with a collective ranking that's going to make up the order for this episode. As we go along, like I mentioned earlier, I'll be pulling from King's notes at the back of the book for each short story. I'll read them when, they're interesting and when they're not. And then we'll discuss our own feelings about each of them. And if we happen to find any pound cake or any King's Dominion or anything, we can throw it out there. So jump in if you've got stuff. I found a couple, but I know there are some I missed. And we were talking about this off air, but I found it really interesting to look at everyone's individual lists. There was definitely consensus at the top and the bottom, but the middle was all over the place. We had some that were like at number 3 on somebody's list and number 10 on somebody else's. So the middle is kind of a really gray area. And Ashley, like you were mentioning, it's hard to rank some of these,
Yeah.
But I also think that's the mark of a strong collection, is that there are not really major outliers in either direction. All right. So
here we go.
After long me talking, number 13 is Rest Stop.
I knew it.
Yeah. Yeah. This was first released in a December 2003 issue of Esquire. And it was inspired by a real incident when King stopped off the Florida Turnpike after midnight to, as he says, tap a kidney. And I want to read the quote. Yeah, I don't know.
That's such a King thing to say.
I hate that.
I know. And I think it's even in the story too, or it's been in something, because I know I've heard that phrase
I'm going to start
before.
stealing that now, and Sammy's just going to get off of me. Like,
she's like, stop.
Yeah.
All right. So he writes, anyway, I paused outside the men's room because a man and a woman were in the ladies having a bitter argument. They both sounded tight and on the verge of getting physical. I wondered what in the world I'd do if that happened and thought, I'll have to summon my inner Richard Bachman because he's tougher than me. And they emerged without coming to blows. Mike, I feel like your King is much better than mine. So your Bachman.
Look, I gotta retire. I don't have a voice for Bachman. I gotta think of someone maybe who's a match for David Lynch. I would just that'll be the Bachman.
Like this.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe he would talk like this.
Yeah, it's King's version of the Bale Batman.
Yeah. Bachman. Whoa. But we all had this near the bottom of our list, and Ashley, you had it dead last.
I did.
Yeah, would you care to talk about?
I just didn't get this one. It was extremely violent. It felt like I had to listen to a pregnant woman get beat up, and then I really didn't get much in the way of redemption. And I think that it would have been higher on my list had, the real Richard Bachman come out and opened a can of whoop ass on this. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted something to happen. And it just sort of felt like he was like, don't do that. Brr, yeah. And they drove off, and it just sort of was like, why did you make me read that? That was so unpleasant.
Yeah, I thought this was pretty thin. I thought this was like, it reminded me of, does anyone use Reddit here?
Oh, every day.
Yes.
Well, so
I'm Reddit adjacent. Corey uses Reddit.
You're an ally.
Okay. So one of my favorite subreddits is the hashtag that really happened. And it's the idea that like, everyone always tells these like marvelous stories, and you're just kind of like, this feels a little fucking bullshit and perfunctory. And like, this feels like that, especially with like the narrator in question, like, like, oh yeah, I heard this, person, they were in trouble and I did something about it. And like, you're like, no, not really. And I kind of like that conceit if it actually led to the idea that this is all in his head and he didn't do it. Yeah. And then he drove away and let this happen. Like, I think that would actually be a stronger tale, but instead, like, he does kind of do something and it's kind of like lame. And then he drives away and then it's like, oh, I'm back to my real me and I'm going to lock it. The landing didn't work for me. And I just felt there's
something hilarious that this is wish fulfillment, and it's not even disguised as anything else. Like in the notes, he is like, I thought about doing this. Like, and here's how it might have played out. And I think that there is something to be said for a story whose conceit is like, what if this seemingly thorny, kind of impossible to know what to do situation arose? Like, what would you do? Like, that's a very interesting place to start. The problem for me is the story privileges the position of, I think all of the like very poorly rated, in my view, stories in this collection position the writer at the crux of a much wider tragedy and make him into a figure upon which that tragedy turns. And it's like, that's just a little like, that's self-obsessed to the point of delusion. Like, and it also leads to some really like kind of icky sentiments about judging the people that are within the tragedy. And like, that's not like that doesn't happen. It's realistic to have the writer talk about the abused woman in this way with language that is kind of like reductive and like, oh, this is the only thing she knows. There's a kind of like gross line where it's like, this is just like how she has to behave because she's been beaten down so much. Like, again, that's A, a real thing, and B, a real thought that someone can have. But the story positions itself as like a sort of arbiter of the justice of the situation. Yeah. And again, the writer as the sort of overseer of what can go wrong and what can go right. There is like an inkling of pushback in that the story tries to make the writer fallible because he's like, these are the stereotypes I associate these people with. Oh, he has glasses. I guess I was wrong about like that one aspect of the stereotype. But it really does not go far enough. Like, it still kind of proves him right at every turn. After that, I was kind of interested in the idea of like settling into your pseudonym and discovering that you have a taste for violence. Like, that to me is like the like heart, the kernel that I wish it had gotten into. But this was second to last for me, and I agree with pretty much everything that everyone said.
Yeah. He is not the victim of this story. No. Like, there is a woman that is getting attacked in the story, and she is the victim. And I think it would have been interesting if this was a piece at the beginning, and then he starts kind of looking for altercations, you know, because like he has gotten that taste for violence. But yeah, and I kind of like if I look at it from a perspective of someone kind of grappling with the fact that there are injustices, there are tragedies, there are things I can't change about the world. And if I were in a position to do it, what would I actually do? And would I have the balls to would I have the guts to actually go in and do it? I don't know. It's off-putting in a way that
kind of.
Not like
I don't remember if it was Tom Segura or Louis C.K. Sorry for bringing his name up, but they had a joke about how when they're on a plane, like they're sitting first class, and they see a soldier get on the plane, they think about giving their first class seat to the soldier, but they don't do it, but they still feel good that they had the thought.
Exactly.
That they would have done it, and they're like feeling that proud, like, yeah, just to think that I would have done that is good. It's like, you didn't do anything.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
You're not that person.
And that's kind of why I was like, the stronger ending for me is if nothing happens.
Yes.
Because that's the more universal approach. It's those things that were like, I should have done that, or like maybe I it's the whole, it's like, Mel, you're kind of itching at this with like the main character syndrome of just like the idea that like, oh, this whole situation lies on me, right? Even though it's it's peripheral to the actual narrator in question. Like, that's so largely part of like the main character syndrome that's pretty prevalent in society right now, especially with the the way social media is. But I do love the idea that we do speculate all the times in our head about these things. And honestly, like, this theme seems to be running rampant throughout this whole book. And I think a lot of it is largely the guilt that we have of like watching everyone die in 9/11 and all these other things happen. I think that's kind of what he maybe is itching at. And he certainly takes that to a literal level in one of the other stories down the road. But I think it kind of itches here where, because he, there's that quote that's on page 165 where he's like, yeah, sure, that was good. Or it could be with a little more thought. Had he thought there was no place for the dog out in the big empty of the American heartland, that was narrow thinking, wasn't it? Because under the right circumstances, anyone can end up there, and anyone can end up anywhere doing anything. And I think it's that can see, it's like, well, this could happen anywhere. What are you going to do about it? And I think most of the time, nobody's going to do anything. Like, I mean, they're just going to walk away. Like, ignorance is bliss. And that's another common theme that's throughout this entire, collection that we'll probably talk about.
Yeah. Well, and I also think the Bachman connection is interesting. And I was just wondering, how often do you think Stephen King is thinking, well, if Richard Bachman was here, he sure would kick some ass? Do you think that's something that's constantly running through his head?
Well, isn't it weird that like his alter ego on Sons of Anarchy is Richard Bachman, right?
It's Bachman,
or the character he plays on that. I mean, I don't know. It's just it's a strange idea that, because like this does feel so like, you might as well just had gone with Stephen King, Richard Bachman. I mean, we know that this probably, the fact that like the origin of the story is literally what happened for like, so it almost feels like the closest thing to a memoirist, which is like kind of weird when you think about it. But yeah, I don't know. I actually found some of the pseudonym stuff to be a little confusing. Like the way that the setup is the story, I kind of had to reread sections being like, wait, is this a person that's like, so he is an author, this is actually happening, like there was just the setup was a little rickety for me.
Now what if it was Thad Beaumont and George Stark? That would be interesting.
I would
take the same story with those names, just switch those names and make it real. Then we'd learn a little bit more about Thad and his, I'm sure, sad life now.
This is one that I had the anticipation towards too, because like back when I was in my other life, when I was in my other alter ego life, when I was a writer, like I remember writing news and like adaptations that are going to be coming out, and like Alex Ross Perry, who did like Listen Up Philip, I think he had option to do this as a movie, and like I was like, oh, so I'd known this story. I was like, oh, I'm excited to read it, and I remember finishing and being like, this would be like the worst movie ever. Like,
It's just a single location. That's why people would want to do it.
Well, and the whole time he drives off, and I was like, okay, so when is this other guy going to get in his truck and start following him? Where's this going? And then it just sort of ended, and I was like, oh, it's going nowhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like it just bears out this like fantasy of power in the real world as a writer, because he's constantly thinking like, what would I do if these people were characters? Oh, they're sort of defying my idea of what characters they would be, but I still can exercise my writerly power over like what happens next. And it totally just sort of proves out his faith that his creativity as a writer and accessing this other writerly persona is going to give him the tools to deal with the situation. And that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then he pukes too, which I kind of did enjoy his reaction to like stepping into that like ultra manly kind of persona, you know? Well, speaking of Sons of Anarchy, they are bikers, and our next story is about a bike. So number 12 is Stationary Bike. This was originally published in Borderlands 5, which is an anthology, and it also contains the story One of Those Weeks by Bev Vincent, who is a friend of the pod. And this is about a guy who is told that he needs to lose weight, so he gets a stationary bike, and then his body turns against him. And in King's note, he wrote, I enjoyed this note. He said, this story came out of my hate relationship, not just with stationary bikes, but with every treadmill I ever trudged and every Stairmaster I ever climbed, which I think is interesting. I did not particularly care for this story, mostly because I think it follows a trend of King's problematic writing about fatness, which we have an episode about. And also because I listen to the podcast Maintenance Phase, and I know that a lot of what this doctor is saying and commonly held believes about fatness and health, especially among medical professionals, is not true. So this one kind of bugged me, but I did enjoy sections of it. I especially liked like him talking about the feeling of being on the road. We all had this near the bottom, but Mike, you had it around 10. So what is it you like about this one?
I mean, in a way,
I feel like that's a challenge question I just asked.
You know, it does feel like a Twinner story to like the road virus heads north. You know, that idea that we're like something that's this creation that you made is like sort of manifesting in your mind. And in that case, it was actually like real shit that's happening. So I guess there's differences, but I don't really mind it. I mean, what tickles me is the origin and kind of what the origin says about King and where he gets the ideas. And we often make fun of that, you know, question, and so does he.
Where
but
do you get your ideas?
You know, I just love that this is strictly from the boredom of what is arguably the most boring activity any of us can do. And like the activity is something that, keep in mind, we've had to create because innovations like cars and public transportation have made all of us, you know, as human beings, just kind of soft and somewhat gluttonous spiritually, mentally, and sometimes physically. And like it's that line in like Back to the Future 3 when Doc's like, he's like, oh, you know, in the future we'll be running for fun, and then the guys are just like laughing him off, like, run for fun, like what kind of bullshit is that? And it's like when you think about the idea of what we do, like, oh yeah, we need to get on this thing and stare at a wall and run or like cycle. It tickles my funny bone just thinking about like King doing this, probably staring at nothing and being like, God, this fucking sucks. And it's true. Like I can't tell you how many times if I go to the gym and I am like, say like my digital headphones break or like, you know, or are dead, or you know, maybe the phone's running low on battery, or even if a podcast is boring or something like that,
you have to be left alone with your own thoughts.
Exactly. And I'm staring at nothing. I'm done. I go home. I just go home. I don't even go to the gym. I'll be like, I'm done. I'll be like running for like 20 minutes. I could have a great run and I'll be like, I can't do this anymore. And I get off. So I do love it for that aspect of it. But I mean, yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's a little long for
what it is, that
conceit. Yeah. It's a little too long for that. Like, I think you could probably have chopped like at least 10, you know, maybe 5 to 10 pages of this and probably have a sharper story. But
yeah. I'm just going to read, here's my notes. King likes to inject specificity into his simplistic moralizing conceits, but it doesn't actually make them better. In fact, to me, in this one, it just makes them a bit more cringy. He wants to believe that an artist has a bunch of blue-collar workers inside him that just live for the job. ? I will say, Jen, I also had the same concerns. Like, I was like, I don't really want to read King on fatness again. This one didn't, like, rankle me as much as others. I was like, oh, that was actually kind of restrained given what I know of King. And then I just got bad for different reasons. Like, I do think, like, his obsession with specificity is such a blessing and a curse. Like, he's like, if I can just describe the, like, way that this worker has, like, discarded a beer can near the site of his suicide and, like, what things smell like that will bring this like rather weird metaphor to life and have it affect people. And I'm like, it really doesn't. It just feels like you got carried away with an idea. And like, now that you're making it so vivid, it's like you're doubling down on something that already was striking me as like weirdly pat, and like your obsession with the sort of like down home, again, like blue collar personas of these guys who need the work to support their families. And it's like what they live for, and their whole persona is just like the work of like keeping this man's body alive. And right. the hat says lipid, and I'm like, I'm done.
It's like Pixar King. Because like this
is
exactly
like, this is
he's like creating he's personifying like just our metabolism, which is what is I don't even know what Elementals is about. Maybe that's what it's about. I don't know, but
it's about elements.
Yeah, Elemental is actually an adaptation of this story.
Right.
Yeah, that's why it's getting awful reviews, I guess, right now. But yeah.
But it's the new Inside Out. It is kind of like Inside Out, though.
Yeah.
Ashley, you had this at number 12 along with me. That's where I put it too. Yeah. Does it piss you off?
I just I could see the sparks of something. Again, just like with Rest Stop, and then it just kind of didn't go. It went somewhere at least, but it didn't go where I wanted it to go, and I didn't understand where it went. Like, I always really like stories, like you said, Mike, where an artist is creating something that seems to like suck them in or change the world around them or whatever. And I think it could have explored more of maybe how much it was taking over his life. There didn't seem to be many consequences to him other than like having to be a little healthier and then having to be less healthy again. And like, I didn't understand.
Yeah, I love that the moral is like a little, like a very specific amount of indulgence is okay. Like, have an ice cream.
Which, like, I do like the idea of a dieting and exercise allegory, because we all know it can go too far. There are people who count every macro, never indulge, never let loose. And it's like, live a little. Like, what are you doing this for? Who are you doing this for? My God, you could still ride your bike every day and you could still eat healthy. But if someone brings cake to a party, eat a piece of the fucking cake. Like, so like,
Yeah.
that
but it's
idea.
Like the only way is to generate labor for your workers.
To generate labor
so
for
they
your
have
inner
something
body
to do.
workers. Like, it just sort of, I like saw where it was going in my head, and I was like, fun. And then I didn't really get where it ended up. So yeah, it was pretty low on my list.
Yeah, it ends up with the colon workers, which I guess is where a lot of things end up, actually.
Listen, who knows?
I do think it's interesting that, like, I mean, we're going to talk about this a little later with Gingerbread Girl, but like, there's something to be said about his personalization here with the compulsion exercising. Like, this character has to force himself to stop riding the bike, just like the same character that's in Gingerbread Girl, and they both relate to some sort of response, that there's some sort of prompt that led him to that, and this sort of thing becoming an addiction. And especially when you consider King's past, I mean, as someone who is from a family of just addicts and left and right, what I've always realized is that no one, I mean, this is going to be controversial, so apologies, but like, this is just my opinion, but I think there really is never death to any addiction. It's just supplementing one thing to another.
Yep.
And I think that's just the mathematics of it all. And so what I've noticed with King is just finding his different addictions. And I think like exercising was certainly one of them, at least maybe around this time, because I'm sure
physical therapy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that came into here. And I think that was a lot of, the sort of reaction to like everything he had gone through, and maybe even just some of the stuff that he's talking about with the world. And so I do think that's interesting that this is like one of, I think like 2 or 3 more stories that deal with that sort of supplementation. And then it's also the story still has to do with 9/11. Like, I mean, like,
well, it does start with a death too. Like, it's hard to remember even because of just where it goes. But like, doesn't the main character's wife has died of
oh, that's
something.
right. Yeah.
yeah. So it is reaction in that sense. I mean, I think when you like think about the sentiment of what he was trying to say here is interesting, but I do think he's done it better in other stories, you know?
Yeah.
And like we were discussing with the conception of like the workers in his mind, I think there's another story that can get a little darker. Like 70s King for me, like those like he'd be driving by and he'd see like, you know, a death of a worker and be like, wait, what's going on here? And then like it would match with like everything that's in his head. Mm-hmm. And like that could be kind of fun, but again, that would just be like, literally the road virus, you know, heads north. So it's just like, and we're a year removed from that one. So it's like, all right, you're kind of dipping in the pool again. But
yeah, I hadn't thought about connecting it to the road virus heads north. That's one of my favorites in Everything's Eventual. This feels to me like the equivalent of King at his typewriter with this guy at the stationary bike. Mm-hmm. Like he's like, I got to get to this page count, or I'm going to type for 2 hours, and whatever I happen to type along the way is what the story is going to be. And I mean, it is mildly interesting. I found the part where he was eating the cookies out of his pocket and his choice of like a Lipton iced tea that's that specificity that I was like, that's a little bit interesting, more so because that would never be my workout snacks, you know?
I bet you that was his. I bet you that's
it
King's.
Probably
like,
is.
There's the King site thing that I kind of love sometimes. Where it's just like, that's so fucking specific. Like oatmeal cookies and like
oatmeal because they're healthier.
Cookies are good. Right.
They have there's a reference to Michael Whelan in this, so it's Little King's Dominion because Michael Whelan was the artist who did a lot of the like Dark Tower artwork, and also
cool.
throwing a nice little ode to Whelan out there. Great artwork, some of the best artwork that's been in King's Dominion for sure. So
I agree. All right, well, moving on to our number 11 story is Ayana. Right. This was released in fall 2007 issue of the Paris Review, and I was like, this feels like a story that might be in the Paris Review, and that is me knowing absolutely nothing about what the Paris Review is, but it just kind of had that vibe to me. And
the Paris Review is like up there. That's like the equivalent of the New Yorker these days.
Oh, is it?
It surprises me that this was in the Paris Review.
See, I think I was just hitting the word Paris. I was like, oh, this feels a little like frou-frou-y. All right, so the notes on this one, or the parts, a segment of it. And when we ask questions about God, one near the top of every list is why some people live and some die, why some get well and some do not. I asked it myself in the wake of the injuries I suffered in 1999 as a result of an accident that could have easily killed me if my position had been different by only inches. On the other hand, if my position had been different by other inches, I might have escaped completely. If a person lives, we say it's a miracle. If he or she dies, we say it was God's will. There is no rational response to miracles and no way to understand the will of God, who, if he is there at all, may have no more interest in us than I do in the microbes now living on my skin. And then he writes, I didn't want to write about answers. I wanted to write about questions and suggest that miracles may be a burden as well as a blessing. And maybe it's all bullshit. I like the story, though. Ashley, I think you had this the highest of all of us, and you had it at number 9.
Yeah.
What is it you like about this
one? Know, I like it. So my dream job, this is an exclusive.
You're manifesting.
A Losers Club exclusive. My dream job is to be a death doula. It's something I've always wanted to do. It's something that I'm like starting to work towards finally. And my biggest fear with the job is simply that I can't handle it. Like emotionally, I can't handle it. Like spiritually, I feel like it's what I'm meant to do and I can do it. But emotionally, I just don't think I can handle it. So I think I just really enjoyed the subject matter, being at someone's deathbed and experiencing death and like all of those questions that go through your mind at the time of like, why is this happening? Why is this happening to this person in this way? It's funny too, because I did read that part, what Stephen had to say about this story, because my initial notes were, some answers would have been nice. Which is hilarious because his actual excerpt is like, I didn't want to write about answers. I wanted to write about questions. And I was like, well, some answers would have been cool. But yeah, I think I just really enjoyed the subject matter. Not so much the execution, because I did kind of feel myself at the end being like, well, geez, like, I went in with the same answers I came out, or questions I came out with. Like, what a bummer. But he's right. I mean, you don't ever know, like, why this happens to one person and not the other, and it's just a part of life, and it fucking sucks. So, yeah. But subject-wise, I liked it. I thought maybe it would have been more interesting if he hadn't been given the gift, and if it had just been he was witnessing others that had that gift. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it was basically he was given a gift that he could kiss people to death. That's not really what it is, but it's like it was like you know, he was what, like ushering them forward,
curing them, I thought,
or curing them. That's what it was. Well, that's why I couldn't remember like which way it went. But the fact that like we never got any answers was the whole point of the story, I guess. But I wanted some. I wanted something.
You'd really like the Colorado kid. I know. Didn't you love that? Yeah. God.
No.
I hated the Colorado kid.
I know.
Yeah, it's really hard to execute a story that does not give you the answer. You know, because you gotta keep it interesting.
But sometimes it's exciting. Sometimes it's
right.
You know,
when done right, I think it's great. You know.
Well, okay. To push back on the answer, like I think the only answer we're missing is like, where does this power come from, right? Like, we know how it works. You get a sponsor that like calls you to someone's deathbed,
right?
And you kiss the person, or you do whatever your version of that is, and then they get better. Like, so what we're really wondering is like where does this come from? How does it work? I will say, like, this was number 10 on my list. I think, like, I did not love this story, but I loved the note because the conceit of, what if miracles were just as fickle as human nature because humans are the ones enacting the miracles? Like, that is like a very good conceit to me. Like, it also solves this like really awful problem that King himself poses, you know, like, why do some people live and some people die? It's because some people are going to come when you call and some aren't. And like, just like we are unreliable and emotionally immature, if we're the miracle workers, miracle work is going to be unreliable and like really arbitrary. And so like to me, that's like actually a huge answer that the story is like handing to us as an explanation for like why these things happen. That being said, the story is not very memorable to me. Like, I think it's sort of cutesy. I think its title plus the introduction of its title character made me go like, oh no, oh no.
I know.
Yes. Same. Big red flags.
At least it like sort of veered into like, you know, broader territory after that. And it did even acknowledge in the text, it was like, I think there's a line that's like, that magical black girl or something. You're like, okay, you sort of know what you're doing.
Would it have been interesting to see a character who maybe said, no, I'm not going to do, you know what I mean? Like, no, I choose not to. Or like, I'm busy right now and I'm not gonna, you know, I have a meeting and I'm not gonna go to this deathbed and cure this person. That would have been interesting.
And I like the sponsor idea that there's just like this stranger that is your usher to like each event. So I don't know. I think that concept is great, but the execution, like you were saying, like really didn't grab me. It was, again, just a little too kitschy and cutesy for me. But I like the ideas it's sort of playing with.
I mean, that's my issue with it. I mean, I think King does drama like 99% of the time, but like this is that 1% where I'm just like feels like I'm like stuck in a waiting room and like the only thing they have on is like Hallmark Channel and there's like the magazines suck and I'm just like, fuck.
That's what hell is.
My phone's dead. Yeah, that is hell actually. I really didn't like this one and I found myself really struggling with it to the point where like I didn't even really connect a lot of the dots. So like, Mel, I think your take is pretty great and I like that. I like that read on the story and I think it's a really like interesting read, and that makes me wish I kind of want to. I'm not going to go back and read it, but it does make me like that's so much more interesting than when I was reading it, because I was just like, oh my god, like it just felt so treacly, and I think I got to look.
Did you have this last, Mike?
Oh yeah, this is last for me.
You and I both had this last.
Yeah, and I texted Jen being like, "Oh God, that Ayanna story fucking sucks." I was like, because I was on such a roll, and I was just enjoying it so much that when like we finally get to that one, I was just like, come on. And it's like, it comes off like right after Mute. And like, and I remember thinking like, man, Mute, that was like a pretty tight story. And then to get to this one, it just feels like it's so like, I don't know, all over the place. It's such a, like, sequentially, it's in a very weird spot in this collection too. Yeah. Like, because it's coming after a lot of stories that are sort of tackling this in probably more efficient ways, but then it's also right before a story where a guy's getting trapped in shit too. So it's just like, it's just a fucking odd placement. And I don't know. It's to me, this feels like the most outlier of all the stories here, even though thematically it does make sense with everything he's talking about in this story, in this collection.
Well, I actually wrote that I was more interested in King's note about the story than I was in the story. And it's not that I didn't like it. I just really found a hard time focusing on it. And like, even now, if you told me to kind of tell you what happened in the story, I would have to reach for some of the details. Kind of for everything Mike was just saying, it just wasn't one that really grabbed me. And it reminds me of the My Pretty Pony or My
Little Pony?
My Little Pony. No, the Nightmares and Dreamscape story where it's just this great.
I thought you meant My Little Pony. I was like, bronies?
Ponies in my house. Oh no, ponies are great. Yeah. But like this one where he's just kind of riffing on time, you know, and it feels like one of those stories where he's just kind of languidly exploring his thoughts. And if I'm into it, then that's great. But if I'm not, then I'm just ready to move on. Well, speaking of moving on, our number 10 story is, I've been writing the title of this incorrectly all day. It is Graduation Afternoon. So that is coming in our number 10 spot. That was originally published in March 2007 issue of Postscripts. And it is the story essentially of a graduation party that is adjacent to New York City, and there's a big explosion or a monster or mushroom cloud. And one of the notes, I thought this was interesting. King writes that it kind of came out of visions that he had with withdrawal from a medicine called Doxepin. And this is just part of why I love his little, his afterwards and notes. He said, for years following an accident in 1999, I took an antidepressant drug called Doxepin, not because I was depressed, he said glumly, but because Doxepin was supposed to have beneficial effect on chronic pain. And then later he writes, like Harvey's Dream, this story is more dictation than fiction. And this one was pretty low on most of our lists. I had it at 10. I like the story. I just think for me, it was a matter of liking others more than this, which is why I think it started falling down. But Mel, you had this one at number 7. What is it about this one that causes a mushroom cloud in your brain?
I mean, 7 is smack dab in the middle. And my first note is, I don't mind this one.
That's kind of how I felt. Yeah.
But
I don't mind
but
this
I do
one.
actually think it's a neat little pocket of flash fiction, and it does exactly what Rest Stop doesn't do, in that it's like, what if this thing happened and you had to observe it and you were totally powerless? And I kind of think he writes this woman about to graduate high school like kind of well. Like, I love her sort of wise beyond her years perspective on her relationship with this rich boy and like his insufferable family, and the fact that she is, there's just a nice balance about her subtle focus on the future with the like literally atomic disruption that then occurs, and how the mother reacts and then like slaps her because she can't accept what's going on. And it's so tidily packaged into this one moment in time. I wrote short but packs a wallop. So I mean, there's like some stupid folksy stuff in there, like of course there is, but I just like didn't find too much to quibble with here. And as a like very like Pollock spatter view of like one apocalyptic scenario, I was like, okay, yeah, like that was disturbing. Like I can get behind that. We haven't gotten to my lowest ranked story yet, so I can't wait to rant about it. But I don't mind this one.
Yeah, what I loved about this is the fact that it is a fever dream inspired by a fever dream.
Yeah.
Like the surrealism of it all is what kind of got stuck in my craw. Like I love how mean spirited the setting is too. It kind of like only exacerbates those surrealism, the feelings of surrealism. Like for me, it reminded me a lot of like the Father's Day sketch that's in Creepshow, where you just have just like a bunch of like rich, mean people with an outlier there. And then like I kind of love how gleefully gooful the bomb is at the end. It's like it in a way it's almost like a blessing. Like it makes me, which makes the story that much more dour. But it reminded me of like, has anyone watched the latest season of I Think You Should Leave? Which, all right, well, there's a sketch in it and it's ridiculous. It's called the Darmine Doggy Door, and something happens in it, and it's like this really terrifying moment. And he jokes, or he's like, the first thing I thought was like, at least I don't have to go to work tomorrow. And he's like, God, what does that fucking say about us right now? And it's like, the fact that this bomb is happening in this situation, it does feel like a weird silver lining in a weird moment. I mean, even though she's talking about how this is just, I'm going to get away from this. This is forever. It does feel like an escape in this kind of, gallows humor way. And I kind of like that about it. Like it for me, that felt very EC Comics. But again, it's like what Mel said, it's like the gasp of it all is like, it's a good gasp. So
yeah,
it's,
I always do love the reminder that any day could be your last day. Like as you worry and dream and make plans and wish and worry and stress, and it's like, hey man, mushroom cloud. So don't worry so much about that. But and it is sad because she is talking about how she's going to go on. Does she want to be a journalist?
I think it's a journalist.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm doing this and Under the Dome. So I read Just After Sunset a while ago because I've been reading Under the Dome for so long. Ooh. So I'm now like, wait, was she a journalist? Yeah. So I could even, the thing is, I initially thought I could have even had a longer story that ended so abruptly. I think it would have made that ending really powerful too if it had been even a longer story. But I think you're right. I think the packs a wallop. It's just short. It's a splatter. It's and then you move on. And I even, like you said, Mel, or no, who was saying that this story just sort of accidentally got pushed further down?
Oh, that was me.
Okay,
yeah.
Because
I just liked others
exactly.
more.
It was like, it's not even that it was that bad. It's just like others just kept finding their way higher. Yeah. I didn't even mean for this to be that low.
Same.
I did want her to smack that.
I wanted her to smack her so bad.
Well, radiation will instead.
Yeah,
so,
well, that's
right.
The
implication,
she gets smacked.
And I do enjoy. Like this is an interesting. Like I feel like King is listening to a lot of country in this phase of his writing because he keeps talking about like the sad country, the real music, and I like the implication that she is going to be the one that survives all of this because she is a real person, and I like that character is. It's a female character instead of a man who's like, I'm going to get in my pickup and sorry, my country is coming out now.
I don't think anyone's surviving, right? Like I think they're all dead.
Yeah.
Oh, you think they all die?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I imagine. I was imagining a Last of Us situation where she maybe she eats the rest of the family because they're all too stupid to survive.
I think Jen, one of your favorite
dead.
movies. Just look, you have a poster right there for it. You know that scene in your favorite movie where Sarah Connor's watching the children on the playground? I think that's
yeah. That is probably what's happening.
Yeah, she's gonna be like, like go next to the pool.
I've really enjoyed the use of that GIF on Twitter recently in regards to everyone watching Oppenheimer.
Oh yeah.
Back.
Yeah.
I mean, the 3-hour runtime I think is dynamite for me. All right. Well, let's move on to our number 9 story, which is kind of a twofer. And this one is The Things They Left Behind. This was first published in Transgressions, Volume 2, 2005 anthology. And I really enjoyed the note that King wrote about this on page 363. Although I have slightly more complicated feelings about the story, but he said, talking about whether he should write this story or not, because he talks about like almost everyone else in America, I was deeply and fundamentally affected by 9/11. And then later he writes, I might still not have written it if I had not recalled a conversation I had with a Jewish editor over 25 years before. He was unhappy with me about a story called Apt Pupil. It was wrong for me to write about the concentration camps, he said, because I was not a Jew. I replied that made writing the story all the more important because writing is an act of willed understanding. Like every other American who watched the New York skyline burning that morning, I wanted to understand both the event and the scars such an event might inevitably leave behind. This story was my effort to do so. And I'll say this story was one of the biggest variables on our lists. And hold on. Some of us had it at the top, near the top, and some of us had it in the bottom slot. And Ashley, you had this at number 2 in your ranking. What is it you love about this one?
I had to ignore a lot, which probably should have pushed it down further because I really did had to take out a lot of things that I absolutely hated about it. But in general, I liked in a little bit of King's Dominion, but not really. I did like that the narrator had a bit of a shine to him. I liked the idea that he had a voice that lived in his mouth, like Danny Torrance. He had his own Tony. I didn't love the inflection that the voice had and what the voice said, but I did like that aspect of it. And I liked the take on survivor's guilt. I liked that it referenced an event that was real and I was alive for, so I could relate to in that way. But I did have to ignore a lot of details to make me enjoy the story.
Yeah. Well, and Mike, you and I both had it smack in the middle at number 7. So did you feel the same way about it?
I mean, I'm not of the mindset of like, oh, you can't write something because you're not, I mean, and that probably is another controversial take of mine, but I don't believe, like, if you wanted, I mean, I'm fine with him writing about Apt Pupil. I mean, I think that argument is fucking stupid. So, and I'm Jewish, so whatever.
Yeah,
but like, I just think
you can decide.
I just think it's fucking stupid. But like, for me, like, I don't mind. Like, I like the setup and I like the idea. I think where it falters for me is that it goes right into the sap.
Yeah.
I kind of like the idea that these objects would just continue to haunt and bring pain and suffering to everyone. Like, I feel, again, like the King of the 70s, I feel like, especially the guy cutting his teeth on, you know, stories for Chevalier or Gallery, I think he'd lean in that gallows humor. I think we would get like a mean twist of fate. You know, and I also think it would go with the sentiment that they discuss on page 241, which is like that if you ignore it, maybe it'll go away. I mean, we talked about this right at the top, or maybe right before we started recording. I can't remember now, but I don't like ghost stories with resolutions. I like the unknown. I like not explaining the terror. So when you have that wonderful moment where Paula brings back the object and she's just fucking gone through the ringer, I kind of like the idea that these objects are going to keep doing that. Like, to me, that
was my favorite part.
Oh, like, yeah, it's just such a cool, creepy moment. But then it's like, oh, they found its rightful resting spot, which, like, that's like, you know, not to tout, but it's like, that's such a Mike Flanagan like movie construct. It's like, oh, we came out, you know, everything's good. We put everything back together. And it's like, come on, like, life is never that simple. It's never going to be that simple. And
that's so funny that we've come full circle to like comparing a King story to a Flanagan.
I know. Yeah, I just don't like the right landing. Like, for me, like, make these objects continue to keep just fucking causing chaos. And I know that would probably be even more problematic given that the ties to 9/11, especially that time, but I don't know. They could make a better story.
I like that read.
You know what it reminded me of for some reason? I don't know why. It reminded me of Stir of Echoes. In the sense where like these things are so wrong and it's almost like solving the mystery of how to fix it and how to get your life back, and then actually doing that in the end. I think that's why I liked it. it really, and I don't know why Stir of Echoes came to mind, but that was the one that came to mind when I was reading it.
I like
but I do.
No, that's dead on. I mean, that's the whole concert.
Mm-hmm.
Stir of Echoes is that.
Yeah.
It's like you stumble upon this mystery and it becomes like
takes over your life. It's sort of destroying your relationships.
Yeah, and like
and
the remnants of like the things that they left behind, like that is still there and the pain is still there. I did like the element of like penance in this story of like and survivor's guilt. I think that's what interested me the most in that. And then there's also that Final Destination moment where like she didn't believe that these things are actually screaming, and then she found out, haha, which I always enjoy. This is a little sicko that I am. But yeah, I kind of enjoyed. I didn't like him calling it Yow Get Down, but I liked
it was so bad.
That bugged me.
It was so bad,
especially listening to it. I was like, but I liked the element of survivor's guilt, and I think this that's a lot of what he's kind of exploring in this. So to me, this story kind of feels like it encapsulates a lot of the themes of the book, even though it's not one of my favorites. But Mel, you had this as
I can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's not going to be anything super like I don't know. I don't have any precision strikes prepared here, but I just feel like, okay, so first of all, the fact that it treats its focus on 9/11 as a sort of twist, like you could have like tracked my face reading this as like, oh, all his coworkers died. Like, how did all his coworkers? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like
it's like a remember me kind of ending, you know?
Yeah.
And it like I don't love that. Overall, I think this is just like incredibly trite in a way that it just rubs me like exactly the wrong way. I think the fact that, again, this person is at the crux of a tragedy that should be sort of like so broadly reaching, but for some reason, like he is receiving these objects from his coworker. Again, it's like privileging work in this weird way. Like, so he has to go take the object to like the grieving families and like the widow and like that. It just like, it seems like another brand of wish fulfillment, like this person who has this grand responsibility foisted upon them in the wake of this trauma. The focus there is all wrong to me. In that the story doesn't quite seem aware of the like inexplicableness of that. Like, I don't want to judge a story from a moral standpoint. Like Mike, I think you can write about anything, and the trick is you just have to do it well. And,
yeah, exactly.
As a fellow Jew who like also, I think I recall I really liked Apt Pupil. So like that's not my problem. Is not like you should not have written this story. My problem is like this story feels like really trite to me. I hate the voice, as other people have said. It doesn't feel earned for him to like get these objects and be the purveyor of their like finding the rightful location. I think the survivor's guilt is the angle that I would have gone with, but correct me if I'm wrong. He's sort of throughout, he's like, this isn't survivor's guilt that's like bringing these objects to me. It's like something else. And like,
like it's
I'm
magic.
like, then what? Like, what is it? It's just that you worked with that.
Well, that's
like,
why I was like, why didn't he expand on the shine aspect of it? Because a voice literally told him to stay home. Like he had something. He has this voice that comes out every once in a while. So that's where I thought it was heading. I thought that maybe that was going to tie into why he was chosen to be the one to, you know, give all these.
And that
things back.
I feel like tying that to guilt would make a lot more sense if you wove it with the supernatural aspect. But even then, it's like the fact of the shine and that it's glossed over in conjunction with this like awful tragedy. It's there's too many gaps in the understanding there for me to feel like this is pulling anything off. Like it really left me like, woof. Like,
this is one you texted me about. You're like, how about that one? And I was like, yeah. I mean, also, can we talk about the jerk off story? I mean, that's
that's
like to me that was.
I mean, who among us?
Well, that was like that's like when I'm trying to think of like a good example of this, but it's like when someone's saying, you know, a long laundry list of things and it's like an SNL sketch where they like do a long things. It's like, oh yeah, Rebel Dildo. And then, I also got, the apples, oranges. You're like, wait, what? Like, what was that thing that you just said a couple of minutes ago? Like, that is
masturbating with my sister's panties.
It's like that. I think you should leave Sketchways at the haunted house. And he's just like, does anybody just blow a huge load on the wall?
Yeah, I mean, it's so left of the dial where I'm like, I can't stop thinking about that now. So like, now you're going back, now you're giving me like 9/11 and all this other stuff. But guess what? Like, can we go back to like this weird anecdote that you just gave us for some reason? Like, I don't know. I couldn't stop thinking about that. Like,
I think
that's like was so distracting.
He's telling us it's okay to still be horny, even though 9/11 has happened,
which is something we all needed to hear.
But then I don't know. That was just probably one of the strangest pound cakes I've ever seen. At least, especially in a short story. Like, I get it if it was like a novel, but like, I don't know.
Feels pretty tame for a novel,
Yeah. Also really specific too. So it's like, I don't really want to do king sites with that one, but,
right.
Yeah. Also weird. There's a guy named Freddie Lounds in this.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for flagging that.
Yeah.
Where do we know Freddie Lounds from?
He's the killer in, Cujo, right? He's mentioned.
This is even weirder. No, he's the journalist in Red Dragon, the Thomas Harris.
That's
wow.
it.
So that's
right. The one that gets glued to the chair.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm sure that's just like he didn't even mean to. He just likes Thomas Harris.
It was a name bonking around in his brain.
So strange.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe King is Thomas Harris.
Yeah,
I found out that was his second Bachman pseudonym all along.
I'd be like, well, Hannibal's still not a good book. But
I knew that name was from some property, and I was like, I thought that was the name of the serial killer in the Dead Zone, whose name is actually what now?
Frank Dodd.
Frank Dodd.
But hey,
okay.
FD or FL.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
it's got similar sounds.
There's also a weird King's Dominion, and there's a reference to the Lou Bega song. And so something weird happened on the Losers Club, this podcast you're listening to. Like, I think it was this year or last year, but we were talking about songs that we like get stuck in our head that like will make us lose our minds. And Randall mentioned Lou Bega's Mambo No. 5, and we went on like a 10-minute discussion about Mambo No. 5. And of course, King being the Rosetta Stone for all pop culture, we found out that like he had an obsession with that song too, and it would drive Tabby nuts in the house. Like, he'd be playing it all the time. So when this popped up here, I was like, oh, I wonder if this was around the time that he was listening to this song. Like, it's just, it was just so weird to see Lou Bega pop up again.
This is another ding on this, is that it is just too reference heavy. And for me, that always kind of makes a King story flounder.
Yeah. Yeah. Something we're going to be seeing a lot of in the future, unfortunately.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. The Institute, especially.
Speaking of Holly. Well, speaking of Mambo No. 5, our story number 8 is
I was like, we're already at 5. Good Lord.
One,
no.
2, 3, 4, 8.
Oh, we're gonna get sued. And it's interesting the way these two fell. So this one is New York City, the New York Times at special bargain rates, which I feel like is like a sister story to the things they left behind, and similarly opposite ends of a lot of our lists. And so this was originally published in October-November issue of the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction in 2008. And he essentially, I'm not going to read it, but he essentially wrote it while he was jet-lagged after a flight from Australia. He doesn't really go into a whole lot of the thought process, but that he can't sleep on planes. I don't know what kind of stewardesses are bringing pajamas to people, but apparently that's a thing that happens. Not anymore, yeah.
The American dream is dead.
Thanks, Bin Laden.
Well, I mean, it is a story about 9/11. And so this is another one that kind of, I already said it kind of feels like a sister story. And Mel, you had this one at number 2.
Yeah, I love this story.
It's so interesting to see the two of you.
I think that I actually even didn't realize that was the specific plane crash being mentioned. Like, I dissociated it from 9/11. But it really worked on me. Like, I thought this was the good version of Harvey's dream, I guess. And like, it was so sweet and so lived in, and these characters had quirks that were believable because they weren't tied to references. They were tied to like character specific memories of like what they would say to each other. And I thought the dialogue was great, which is not the case for all these stories. Like the way that the husband sort of talks over the phone and has like a rough understanding of why he could even get through to her in the first place. The wistfulness of the end where, you know, she's moved on, she's adapted after this tragedy, she's remarried, she can hear the phone ringing, but at that point it's just a solicitor basically. Although with a New York connection, so I don't know. But I just like really thought it was considered and measured, and I don't know, it hit me in that special place of like he considered what this marriage looked like. And when you would have this very short amount of time to talk to the person you loved most, with the idea that you could get cut off at any minute, to watch her go through the sort of like terror and then the denial and then the acceptance of like this is who I'm actually talking to, and I know from his voice and the way he's talking to me, and their like little pet phrases to each other, and how he says he loves her, and the fact that he has like a shine now because he's a ghost, so he can sort of like dip into things to come. I don't know, it was firing on most cylinders for me, and it was very affecting.
Yeah.
Sam,
Mike,
I thought this
you
is
had it at 8.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think this is when sap's done right. Like, you know, and I don't even really call it sap, but I would just say, like, you know, in the context of everything else in the collection, I think it would fall into that. But I think it really got me too. I mean, I think it's because for me, it's a lot of showing versus telling. Like, and the references I think is a big part of that too. It's like he's really good at love. Like, I mean, I'll say this again and again. Like, I think it's really romantic too. It tugs at the heartstrings with genuine feelings of loss. Like, I believe this loss. I believe the guilt of having that moment, especially happen when everyone's downstairs. I think how, like, the way that he's able to show that weigh on you, and even as as time goes on, he's really good at that. And I think this is another prelude to like what I was saying with 11/22/63. I think it's like another story that's getting him closer to those feelings, which is a magic that he's able to kind of wheel out. I think this is one of his stronger flexes in the latter half of his career. And there's another story here that I'll certainly discuss that with. But this one really hit me. And I honestly, like, kind of had to stop for a little bit after this one, because it was like it did like there's something about the realism of this, even though it's so fake, like, or not fake, but so like surreal. Like, there's something about the idea of like knowing that phone call happened, and knowing that there is an afterlife of some sorts, like, and having that realization and having to live with that. Like, I kept thinking of like, what would I do with that information? Like how would I live my life knowing that someone did speak to me from the grave? And I don't know, it's just something that's been stuck with my head for a little bit. But
I like that the answer is like, you don't change much, just as everyone still flies back and forth at the end, and they don't really make a note of it. Like, again, it's that sort of like, you got to keep living, you got to adapt. And like, yeah, I love that a lot of his afterlife stories go hand in hand with mundanity in that way. Yep. And like, he can convey that really well.
And there's some images
it's that kind of helped me shape what.
Well, there's just some images from that afterlife that really stick with you too, that are also kind of unnerving. Like, there's another story that deals with this too, that we'll talk about. But the idea of like, when he talks about like the pilot that's just like going in a circle talking to himself again and again, like, that is scary to me. Like, that's like, a soul in guilt, like, or a soul in like turmoil, like a soul who can't accept.
Wait, so this isn't actually a 9/11 plane, right? It's a different plane.
I think it is. I think it's a 9/11 plane, right?
I got 9/11 vibes. I didn't read anything about what Steven said about this, and I even wrote in my notes, like, I thought this was going to be another 9/11 story, and maybe in some way it was, inspired by the people who made those last phone calls from the planes.
Yeah.
I thought it crashed into an apartment building. And
I think it did. It did.
Okay, so
I remember that much.
I think what I got from the pilot was like, they're going to think I just crashed the plane. Like, they're going to think it's my fault, aside from like, they're not going to know about this larger plan, you know? I got the feeling that it was a 9/11 thing, although I think it could it doesn't essentially matter if it is or not, because it kind of is talking about that, like, what do you do in the immediate wake of a tragedy? I think one of the things I really liked about this is this place that this woman is sitting in, of like, she is now a widow. She's been a widow for like 24, 48 hours, but she doesn't feel like one yet. And it's like, what do you do in the immediate wake of this, where you're not quite sad yet because you still don't quite believe that this is real.
It hasn't even hit you yet. Yeah.
Right. And there's something she says about her husband. She's like, I believed that it was the last time we would ever talk, but I also couldn't believe that it was the last time. And it's just this kind of weird limbo that I think she finds herself in. Yeah. Ashley, what do you think about this one?
I really liked this one. This was one, I think it was like ended up randomly at number 10, but again, it was just because stories kept getting pushed before it. It wasn't anything to have to do with this story, because I really liked it. And I know I've talked about this on the show before, especially in Soul's Midnight. I'm massively obsessed with the idea that the dead or the world beyond can communicate through electronics, radio, television, TV static, electricity in general. So like, I was super into that. And it was also very reminiscent of one of my favorite scenes from one of my favorite horror movies, in Exorcist 3, the dream that Kinderman has that takes place in what I can only describe as purgatory. And I think this, for me, I think this one would have been really effective as a short film, because I think a lot of the parts for me that really stuck with me were like the way he sounded on the phone and like the way he described where he was. And I was like dying to visually be shown what he was seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but I liked it. I liked it a lot.
I do too. And I love when he talks about the afterlife. There's a story in his newest collection that's specifically about the afterlife that I don't particularly like. But I do like that it is essentially just kind of a continuation of where you were before, and that it is something that we're going to talk about in another story that's coming up. And on that note, we are going to cut this episode in half. We are going to call it a day. A little knickknack just appeared on my desk, and I have to take it back to its owner before it starts screaming at me. We will be back to finish our ranking and Knows the Collection in our next episode, which will drop. Mike, do you know when that's going to drop?
1 week from now. So,
1 week from now. And until then, we will be seeing you over long days
and pleasant
nights.
I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. But you know you want somebody to treat you good.
This is the end of our show. For now. Tune in next week. If you like our programming, consider searching for other Bloody Disgusting podcasts, such as Creepy, Horror Queers, The Boo Crew, SCP Archives, Nightlight, Margaret's Garden, and more.